Hey everyone. First off, welcome and thank you for joining me here this afternoon. Thank you for being part of the Artwork Living community, because if you're here, that means that you are either on my email list or you are a frequent visitor to my website and knew that I had a webinar scheduled for today. First off, I just want to say how much I appreciate you and appreciate your being part of the community. And one of the things about being in a community is that when stuff happens, communities need to come together. So I had a whole different day planned, afternoon planned for what we were going to do this afternoon in talking about our art and getting it in front of an audience. And I'm still going to cover that because I know there are people who made time to be here. But I also want to talk a lot about why it's important to still make art. So for those who are not in the US, we had a great tragic day yesterday here. We had violence erupt on the grounds of the Capitol. And that is as traumatic for all of us in the US as 9/11 was. And I want to acknowledge that right out the gates. Yeah, I know, Susie, it affects Canada too. It affects everybody. It's a catastrophic moment. And that means that we can't just go on business as usual, and I can't just talk and blithely pretend like yesterday didn't happen. So, like I said, I'm still going to talk about audience, but I want to talk first about why it's still important to make art and it's still important to share art, even when things feel chaotic. And 2020 was a really chaotic year. I think 2021 is going to settle down. So if I can make predictions about 2021 is I do think that the world is going to be less chaotic. I do think things will settle down. But we are still going through some ups and downs and some chaos. And I think if we ignore it, that's being horribly naive. But the flip side to that is that I know, and I'm hearing from a lot of artists, both in the free Facebook group and via email, that they are so unsettled that they feel like they can't paint and that there's no reason for them to paint and that there's no reason for them to share their art. I just read an email from someone that really does break my heart. She feels like there's no reason for her to try to sell her artwork now because too much bad stuff has been happening in the world. And I want to say right off the bat, the world needs your art. The world needs your art now more than it ever has before. However you want to deliver it out into the world, whether you want to make it be the thing that is how you're earning a living, or you just simply want to share it for impact, the world needs you. Because art is an antidote to chaos. And if ever there's a time that we need that antidote to chaos, it's now. So now is absolutely the time to be sharing your work. You don't have to be asking for a sale to share your work, but you do need to share it. It will benefit not just the people who are seeing it, it'll benefit you. Because one of the surest ways to navigate through chaos is to stay connected to the things that matter the most to you. And I know that your art matters to you. And I want you to understand and believe that your art matters to other people. And that simply seeing your painting, even if it's of something that you don't think matters, I'm promising you it matters to somebody out there. It's going to lift them up during a time when they're feeling low. It's going to lift them up during a time when they need to focus on something else. It's going to lift them up and give them a pause, a space to not be swept up in the chaos. So I think it's super important for people to realize just how important it is to create. It doesn't mean that you have to become a professional artist. It doesn't mean you have to be marketing your work. It doesn't mean that you have to be promoting yourself out there now. Please keep creating. Please keep painting and know that this too shall pass. And we can be part of the agency of helping all of us move through this. So don't lay your paintbrush down. We can paint the world back together again. We can paint our way through it, but you can't stop painting. You have to pick your paints back up. You have to pick your brushes back up, and we have to keep moving on. We have to keep sharing our work with the world. It is more important now. It is more important today than it was last week, and it's more important today than it was last year. So I want you to know that your work matters, and it matters on a very, very deep level to the community that you're a part of, even if that community is only 3 or 4 people. I actually don't think it's just 3 or 4 people. Our world is much smaller now. You know, they used to talk about 6 degrees of separation, and I think it's down to really about 3 degrees of separation worldwide now because of the internet. So you have a huge audience out there that you may not even be aware of. And every time you share one of your paintings, a piece of art out into the world, you are sending it out to transform other people. Don't shut that off. Don't lock it away, and don't lean into despair. Now's not the time. We're going to get through this, and we are going to be okay. But we have to keep sharing our work. Super, super important. So I want you to understand that, and I want you to know that you may never know the person who sees your painting and is impacted by it. Sometimes those things happen in a way that, I mean, somebody sees something and it's never shared with everyone else. You may not ever hear. You may hear what impact it has. But if you hide it away, then you're hiding it from somebody who needs to see it. So I want y'all to promise me that you're not going to put your paintbrush down, and you're not going to stop sharing your work, and that you are going to focus on sharing the creativity that you've got inside with the rest of the world, because I firmly believe that's a responsibility. You don't have to make money from it. That's completely up to you. It's not bad if you decide that's what you want to do. But you do have a responsibility to the world to share your creativity in whatever way, whatever form that it takes. There are people out there who need to hear from you. So your audience already exists. It's out there, and they're listening to you, and they're paying attention. So now's the time to stand up, and now's the time to share. So it is absolutely crucial that you do. Josephine says, thanks for the affirmation that we have to keep going with our art. It's really true, and it is critical right now. I know a lot of people may ask themselves the question, why does my painting matter when there are people who have lost their jobs, people who are sick, people who are struggling with lots and lots of horrendous things? The reason is because what you share has the potential to give them that little tiny piece that they need to keep going. It's that important, really important. Yet Nancy says, painting puts me in my happy place. Absolutely true. And that in and of itself is enough reason to be painting. Because if you lift yourself up by going to paint, then you are, even never mind the painting part, you're sharing that uplifted self with everybody else who's around you. So that is the important message that I want to get across today. Absolutely important. Pamela, yes, thank you for sharing that. And she says, I agree that as an artist, we have a responsibility to share our visions with the world. It's crucial that you do that. It really is. Nobody else has the voice that you have. That's why it's so important. Each one of us is unique. And I see people all the time thinking, a lot of people thinking that there's so many other artists out there. What does my work matter? Or how can I possibly compete with these people who've been painting longer than I have, who have more education than I have, or who have whatever else it is that you feel like is blocking your ability to make it and to share your work. They don't have you. They don't have the thing that makes you. And there are people out there who need to hear from the person you are with the things that matter to you. So I was talking to a coaching client about a week and a half ago, and we were talking about what it is that matters to her that she shares with the world. And it really comes down to some real simple things. What do you care about? What are you passionate about? What are the most important things to you? What are your values? Now, values is an overused word, but it's important for a reason. What are the things that you care about tremendously? And it's not just painting, it's also other things. It could be, like for me, one of the things I'm passionate about the landscape, not just painting it, but I'm passionate about preserving it, caring for it, caring for the creatures that live on it. That's part of the passion that I share with my audience. There are people who need to hear that and need to hear it from the way that I say it in my paintings. Same is true for you. And there's an audience out there for whatever the things are that are most important to you. Don't try to be somebody else. Be you. And when you're you and you share your uniqueness with the world, you're going to find that audience. Greg, thank you for sharing that. Greg says, this is quite emotional. I didn't realize I'd buried a lot of these feelings. That is one of the reasons I came on today. I thought about canceling the webinar, but I don't think that's right either. But I do think we have to talk about the things that are important. And then PNS says, what are the best ways? What's the best way or route to share? That depends on you. Now, the things that I had listed that I wanted to talk about today, I'm still going to talk about because I think they're still important. And oddly enough, they do really apply to what we're talking about. One is community. I think that after the year that we had last year, community is more important than it ever has been before. People have been isolated from their communities physically, and we've turned to online communities as a way to maintain that sense of connection. So one of the ways that you can share, one of the routes is to look for communities around the things that you value, around the things that you care about, and share your work with them. Not to promote it. So I'm not talking about going into Facebook groups and going, here's my painting, buy my painting. Don't do that. They'll kick you out. But if you are going into a Facebook group that's about the things that you value the most and you share your work in an authentic and honest way, it's going to give value to that community. You're going to be sharing your uniqueness with that community. So community is super important. And right now, a lot of that is online. So think about where you can find those communities. You can find them on Pinterest. You can find them on Twitter. You can find them on any social platform. We think about Facebook groups first, but they are certainly not the only place. You can create your own community. So if there's something you feel passionate about, start a Facebook group about it. Great place to share your work. So build community, build authentic community. One form of community is an email list. So, an email list is a way to share your work with them authentically, but also share that sense of community, share joint experience, allow people in a more personal way. That's the second thing that I think is even more important in 2021. So, I think, and back up a second, I promise it's going to be a little more rambling today than I would have intended because I do want to touch on more points than, or touch on them in a little bit different way based on what's been happening. But I think community is crucial and it's part of our obligation as artists is to be a part of a community. It's to be in community. And I know a lot of us tend to be a little bit shy, a little bit introverted, and be more comfortable letting our art do the talking instead of us do the talking too. And I want to challenge all of y'all to not do that as much. Don't hide away. Start talking about why your art's important to you. That's one of the most attractive things that there is out there for your audience is to share why it's important to you and share it honestly. So I know that y'all have heard the word authentic before in terms of marketing, if you've followed any kind of marketing stuff at all. And it's another one of those words that gets overused and it becomes a little meaningless when people throw it out there all the time. So I'd substitute the word honestly instead. Don't try to be somebody else. One of the biggest downfalls that I see artists trap themselves in is trying to be what they think the market, in quotation marks, wants, which means trying to make art for the market. And that just does not work. You have to make art that speaks to those values, whatever those are. And when your values are in alignment with the values of the audience, that's when the exchange of art and audience happens, even if it's not a monetary exchange. That's the important connection, and that's the community. So you build community when you share your work with people who share your values. And it's part of the responsibility that we have as creatives to do that. So it doesn't mean you need to go out and rush to find that audience, but just start sharing and the audience will gather around you. So my number one suggestion for the ways to share your work and to be part of the solution and not part of the problem is to be in community, to share your work in a community, to be part of building community, to be part of building connection, because we really, really need that right now. That's how we walk stuff back and get to a point where we're all talking again. So be in community. Let your artwork be part of that. And don't overthink what it is that you need to paint. Paint what matters to you. The rest of that will follow. So paint what matters to you, share it with people who share your values, and then you'll create community. Number two, the second thing that I think is super important and more important in 2021 is that people need personal contact. What do I mean by that? Because certainly in the time of COVID, that doesn't mean running out and standing on the street corner and giving everybody a hug. That's probably not a great idea. But what it does mean is that instead of trying to speak to an anonymous audience that's out there, that's kind of faceless, that you want to begin to build personal one-to-one connection. You want to begin to build conversations with an audience, with your community. So number one, start building community. Number two is to develop that personal contact. That's how you're going to impact people's lives right now. That's how you're going to begin to build relationship People don't want anonymous connections and automation. They want conversation with a person, a real person. So be the real person and respond to people, answer questions. Like I said, I know we're introverts, but this is not a time for hiding behind our introversion. One of the beauties of online, which is where we are right now for the most part, is that it's the perfect space for us introverts. We don't have to put on fancy clothes and go to an opening and actually talk one to one with all those people in there. We can talk one to one through the computer screen in a way that may feel a little bit less intimidating to you. But the more you begin to talk to people, the more impact you will have. And the sharing of your work that you do one to one will have a tremendous impact, one that you may not even realize at the time. I know of plenty of artists who've shared with me stories about what's happened when they've shared their work with someone and the impact that it's had. I'm thinking about a friend of mine that is a painter who shared her work with someone, and it reminded him so much of someone he had lost that he wanted to buy the painting. And then when he passed away, it became a family heirloom because it reminded the family of how much that thing had mattered to him. Your work has impact. When you build that relationship and that connection, you literally are helping to save the world. And I know that sounds Pollyanna-ish, but it's true. We save the world one person at a time. Back when I was still teaching full-time at the college, I taught for almost 30 years. Well, I did teach for 30 years, but I taught one course in particular for almost 30 years, and it was the senior exhibition course. And as part of that course, my students had to develop a body of work, a plan for a body of work, and they had to talk about the concept behind it. And one of the things that happens to 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, when they're asked to come up with a concept for their work is that they are young, they're idealistic, and they want to save the world. And so they want to create artwork that's going to save the world. And they would talk about how their work was intended to end world hunger. Their work was intended to end homelessness. Their work was intended to fill in the blank. And all of those are absolutely wonderful goals. But a single artwork is probably not going to accomplish that huge big goal for humanity. But what it does do is impact one person that impacts another person and then impacts another person. And once those students realized that they didn't have to save the whole world at one time, it was tremendously freeing. So I would talk to them about not trying to solve the whole big problem, but how can you solve a problem? How can you address something you think is an issue? How can you speak to what is important to your values in a one-to-one conversation? Think of your paintings as being a one-to-one conversation. So they are sharing one-to-one with your viewer. They become the intermediary between you here and your viewer here that you may never meet. But your artwork meets in the middle, and it's the contact point for that conversation. So I want you to think about your paintings as being a one-to-one conversation. You're going to build community, and you're going to create conversations. And yes, you will make a difference when you do that. It's not based on your skill level. It's not based on your style. It's not based on your medium. It's based on you and the conversation that you have with the world. The third thing, the third part of that, the third thing that really is super important is to remember that one of the things that has happened is that people are, for the most part, in their homes. A lot of people are working from home, so that the internet gives you a chance to share directly into someone else's home that you've never met. So I think there are hundreds of different ways that you can approach delivering your work to the people that need to see it. And you don't need to be everywhere. You need to be in the places that feel like the most normal and honest ways for you to share your work. So sometimes people ask me, well, should I be on Facebook or Instagram? Should I be on Twitter or Pinterest? And the answer is maybe. The answer is what platform feels most normal for you? What platform is your audience on? And then what you need to do is to show up consistently. Now's not the time to put your brush down and hide. Now is the time to stand up and share your paintings with the audience that's out there. Share your artwork, even if it's not painting, whatever your art form is, your creativity. So that means that figure out which platform is the one that is most natural for you to enter somebody else's home space on. Think about where people are when they are looking at your work online. They are in their homes. So have those personal conversations with them. Create a sense of community. And I promise you'll be making a difference. You'll be making a huge difference. So let's see what other questions we have here in the group. Yeah, Stefan said the question is always whether we look for excuses or opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities out there. And I think that, as I said before, that now more than ever, people need to see it. So as soon as the kind of the secret sauce in there is that when you show up and when you share your work on a consistent basis, then it is not necessary for you to become salesy. You don't have to do that. You never have to cross that line into making conversations that feel uncomfortable. You can share your work, and if you're showing up for your audience that you've created through building community, then you don't have to become a salesy person. You can simply share your work, and sales will tend to follow if that is your desire to do, but you'll definitely have an impact with your work when you do that. Noah, thank you. Says your community building work is as important as the technical knowledge you share. Thank you. You're welcome. Creating community is a big, important thing to me. Connection is one of my values, and I think it's super important. And I don't want people to feel like they have to fall off track in a lot of ways because of what's going on. So decide on an avenue for yourself to create community. Decide and commit to building those conversations, having those one-on-one personal connections with people. Commit to the fact that you're going into other people's homes with your work through the internet. Pick that platform and show up in some way every day. It doesn't mean you have to make a long, deep, thought out post that dives in great depth and detail into the motivations behind your artwork every single day on Instagram. That's not what I mean. It can be as simple at the beginning as showing up and posting an image of your painting and talking about it, or showing up and sharing a video of the place that you like to paint or the process that you go through when you're painting. So there are all kinds of things that you can share. Henny says, I often stop myself from painting because I think I have nothing to say, but you've reminded me that appreciation of nature and beauty of design and form are sufficient values to express. They sure are. And again, people need to see those now. So the part of your art that matters could be as simple as beautiful color. That is enough. It doesn't have to be something that is a big picture, huge solution to an issue. Josephine says, I'm lucky to have local art community. That's fantastic. So Kinvara Area of Visual Arts in County Galway, Ireland. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to meet face to face, but we did have a fortnightly drawing club a regular exhibitions by members. That's awesome. Yeah, and she said we just share our work on the WhatsApp group and Instagram page. That's a great way to do it. So one of the things that you can do right now, and I know that Stefan, I think it was you that had a question that you emailed to me about whether there's a market in sharing your work with other artists, with other artists to collect art. And the answer to that is yes. So one thing you might want to do right now is form a community like the one that Josephine is talking about, an art community where you share art ideas with other artists. Yet, not necessarily with the goal of selling your work to those other artists, but simply with the goal of building a community of artists. Then you might group together and share names and market to people that members of that group know. So you can absolutely share resources that way. And that's a way to build community. But Stefan, yes, artists do collect art. I collect art. And I know a lot of artists that collect art. I would say probably 20% of my collectors are other artists. So it's entirely possible to do that. I would not advocate that you think of artists as being your only target market, but I think they can definitely be part of your target market. But think about the people that share the same values that you share around your work. All of those things are important. I've talked a lot about values, I've talked a lot about community, and I've talked a lot about that personal contact, that one-on-one. And when all three of those things are in alignment, then you'll have an audience. And once you build an audience, then you can figure out how you want to have impact, whether that's through creating profit for yourself, creating profit for others, or simply transforming lives through the sharing of the work. It's completely up to you. Garrett says, I tell my dog that all the time. If he is not part of the solution, he's part of the problem. Absolutely. Yeah, there's not really an in-between. I totally agree with that. Sujata says, there's no dumb question. Let me stop first right there and say that. I've taught all of my adult life. And in all of my years of teaching, I've gotten a stupid question one time, literally once. And there's no such thing as a stupid question. There really isn't. So ask any questions that you want to ask right now. So there's no problem with doing that. Sujata says, do you have an online community where your students, followers share their work? And if so, how do I become a member of that? I sure do. I have a free Facebook group, and I will give you the link to that in just a second. I'm pulling it up in my browser so that I can pop the link here into the chat roll. So that group is not for selling, but it is for sharing ideas and getting feedback and critiques. So we don't allow selling in there, but you absolutely are welcome to join and share your work and get critiques from fellow members. So Sujata, put the link right down here in the chat roll. And hopefully you can see that right down there. It should take you straight to Facebook. And there are some questions. We have rules in the Facebook group around sharing and kindness and all those other sorts of things I think are important as part of community. And as soon as you answer those questions, say yes, that you agree to the rules, then you're automatically in. Yeah, let's see. And Kay says, please address the question about hashtags. Let me scroll back up and see if I see an earlier question about hashtags or if you just have a general question about hashtags. And yeah, Josephine, I'm so glad. I sent you an email just a few minutes before we got online live. Josephine just joined my course this week. And I want to see if you have a specific question around hashtags. And if you do, drop that in here. If not, I'll give you my general overview here. Cool. I don't see anything. Oh, here it is. Sylvia says, how do I know what hashtags I should use when I'm on social media to generate community? So the hashtags are just search tags. Think of them as words that people use to search for things. So when you know what are your most important values, the things you value the most, those are your first search tags. So if you look at the tags, the hashtags that I use, one of them is landscape. That's one of my big values, and it's on there because I want other people who find the landscape to be important to find me through that. Landscape painting is another hashtag. So start with the things that are most important to you, the values that are most important to you. Then look at hashtags that other successful artists are using in the same niche that you're in. And you have to test those to see if they're going to work for you. You won't know whether they'll work for you and your audience until you've run them a little bit. You can only use 30 hashtags at a time, and I put them into the first comment. That way they don't get the caption all stuffed full of the little hashtag pound sign. Every now and then I'll put a hashtag into the caption on Facebook and Instagram if it fits in the context of the caption. Otherwise, I only put them on Instagram in the first comment. So that's the best way to get started. You can also include things like location where you are, location if you're a realist painter, location of the subject that you're painting, because that's going to draw in community. So that's where I would get started. Look at the values that you want to share, look at the location that you are in and your subjects in, and then look at the hashtags that people are just ahead of you are using in your niche and test them out. You can see in the analytics, let me get a swig here. You can see in the analytics which ones are getting the most reach and which ones are bringing the most people to your Instagram's account. And those are the ones you want to keep on using. Ones that people aren't responding to, those are the ones you want to let go of. So it's something you build up over time. Don't use the same ones all the time. Shift them so that they're appropriate. So let me know if that answers your question, Sylvia. It was a great one. And let's see. I think that was the other big one there. Josephine says, Josephine said, I've had some great feedback, critique, and constructive suggestions from sharing on some different Facebook groups for artists, including the Artwork Living group. I'm glad that you're enjoying that one. But yeah, I think that artist groups on Facebook can serve tremendously right now to provide community, that sense of shared experience that we have as creatives. So find a group that feels like it's right for you. People have different needs in critique, and you want to make sure that the one that you're joining and sharing in is going to be the right fit for you. Stefan, you mentioned one of my mentors, somebody whose work I adore, Seth Godin. So one of the first online courses I took was from Seth Godin back in, I think it was 2013, 2014. But yes, he is precisely right. Stefan wrote, Seth Godin says, figure out what you stand for. It is the heart of your work. And I've said it in multiple different ways and multiple different times, both on my blog, in my emails, and in my webinars. You need to know your why. Your why are your values. What's important to you? What do you stand for? What is stuff you're not willing to let go of? What is stuff that is non-negotiable that you're not going to let go of? That's what you stand for. There's an audience out there that shares those values that needs to see your work. It's super important to share that. And I would highly recommend any books by Seth Godin if you're looking at how to find a tribe and an audience and how to share your work with the world. He just wrote one that came out 2 months ago, I think, on about sharing your art. And he's talking about art in a big, broad sense, in the sense of anybody who's creative. And he considers business and marketing creative as well, as I do. But yes, The Practice. Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, it is an awesome book, and it is precisely written for us. It is an excellent book. I think I have my copy right over here on the side. So yes, highly recommend that book. There are, in fact, I can't think of any book he's ever done that doesn't apply. And a lot of my ideas around creating an audience and growing an audience go straight back to what I've learned from him. One of the things that impressed me about Seth Godin years ago was that he doesn't do it as much anymore, but because his audience is just too huge, he responded to his audience. So if you really were struck by something that he wrote and you wrote back to him, he would write back to you. And I wrote to him one time and he wrote back to me. He responded to questions in his courses in a one-on-one way. As very well known as he is. And I think that's one reason so many of us, like me and Stefan, are super drawn to him because he builds community. So I'll type that again down here, Nancy. It's Seth Godin, Godin. It's in the chat roll. It's Seth Godin. And the name of the book is The Practice. It's about what goes into being a creative and being committed to your work. It's not about how to sell your work. It's about how to share your work with the world, with the people who need to see it. So highly recommend that book. It's a great one. Let me see if there's anybody else who has a question or a comment that they want to make. I think I have caught the questions that were in the group, but I want to make sure I haven't missed anything that was important. I got the one about the hashtags. So just to reiterate, the things that are important right now, more than ever, your art matters, your work matters, and please still keep painting. Don't put the brush down. The more that you pick the brush up, the more that you'll be able to paint. I know that chaos can be a block to creativity, but it's also, painting is the way through that. So paint and share your work. Think about how you can help to create community. Think about the communities that already exist that you can share your work with. And you find those communities through knowing your values, knowing what's important to you. Don't try to share your work with a community that doesn't share the same values, because it'll fall flat. It'll absolutely fall flat. Remember that making a one-to-one personal connection is more important than ever right now. And that you want to find the platform that you feel comfortable on, that your audience is also using. Again, that's part of that community, so that you can begin to build community. You can begin to have those one-on-one conversations. There's no right or wrong social media platform to be using. It needs to be the one that you're actually going to show up on. So there's no point in saying, I'm going to use Instagram if you hate Instagram, or I'm going to use Facebook if you hate Facebook. Use the one you love, but also make sure that your audience is on there. So look for people who share those same values. Nancy, I'm glad that makes sense. Cool beans. Heather says she just joined Artwork Living this afternoon. You couldn't go to a group with chats. I'm not sure what you mean, Heather. Artwork Living. Let me just share the group for a minute because it's just a Facebook group. So we don't have separate chats in there. So that may be what you're asking about. But we don't have separate chats in there because we can't monitor them. The group is huge. That's one of the pluses. It's also one of the minuses sometimes. The free group is big. My courses aren't filled with as many people as that. I like to split things up so they're a little bit more personal. But the free group has 15,000 people in there. So we can't monitor individual chat rooms or chats inside the free group. So that's why you can't do a chat in there. But you can absolutely have a conversation by posting and asking a question and then answering comments in the feed. And you'll see people do that and talking about ideas within the Facebook group. So it's absolutely fine to do that. Does that answer your question? I think it did, but I'm not sure. So Heather, let me know if that answers the question that you put into the chat roll. If not, elaborate a little bit more and I'll be happy to answer that. So one of the things I would like to know is how many of you feel like you really know what are the things that matter to you the most? What are the values that you hold dearest? What are the things that you feel like are your non-negotiables? If anybody is ready, would like to, or is willing to share, what are some of the things that matter to you most? Type those into the chat roll. Share one thing, one value that is most important to you. So Corin says her faith. Absolutely, that's true for a lot of people. Greg says expressing something of my soul. So that sounds like spirituality is important to you. Those are really big issues, big values. And I think that you want to hold on to those as you're sharing things. Nancy says, my truth. Absolutely. And your truth is your values. Jane says, learning, the journey. Yeah, I think education, learning, always being a constant learner is an important value. Cheryl says expression and art. Mary Jane says it's going fast here. Multi-ethnicity, equality for all. Yeah, building bridges is what Nella says. I think that's a great one, Nella. Stefan says, make it look effortlessly done. So Stefan, is that something you want to do in your art, or is it a value, something that's a deep core feeling? So you want to make it feel effortless, make it feel easy. Ease would be a great core value. Sujata says honesty with self. That's a great one. Barb says sharing a sense of hope and love. Yeah. Kay says staying positive in the fragility of life. Absolutely. Josephine says being true to myself. Love of nature. Experimentation. Yeah, that's a great one, Paula. Sylvia says sharing the beauty in landscapes for those who can't get out in nature. That's a fabulous value. So when you think about what's important and what values are, you just look back through that list of values that people just shared. All of those things are things that other people will share as well. And all of those are things that you can find communities around. So all of those are also things that can help change people's lives. All of those are things that can help you be something that is part of making a difference. So homework for everyone. Like I said, I'm not going in the exact direction I planned to go on today's webinar. In other words, I'm not going to start outlining other stuff and programs. I want to talk about what your next steps are. What can you do next? Take a little time with yourself. Fix a cup of tea, a cup of your favorite coffee, and make a note. This is what you this is what I mean, Paula. I want you to think about what are the things that you value the most. Make a list of 4 or 5 different things. Then one place to start, even if it's not where you want to create a community, is to do a search for groups on Facebook around that value. Search for things that are connected to that value, communities that already exist. And that's a way to get started. Paula says, I'm stuck on finding communities. Do you mean by using hashtags? Here, I'll show you, Paula, really quick. That's a great question. So let me share my screen here for a minute. I'm going to go back to Facebook. So if I want to find communities on Facebook around things that are really important to me, one of the things that's important to me is the physical landscape and preserving that landscape. And so I could type in conservation, and it's going to give me a list of things that relate to conservation. And to start with, it's going to give me a list because I haven't asked for specifics yet. It's going to give me a list of posts on Facebook, people on Facebook, photos, videos, marketplace, not going there, pages, places, groups, and events. Well, if you're looking for community, one of the places to start is groups. So look for groups. So I'm looking for conservation, not conservator. Conservator is somebody who fixes paintings that are broken. I'm looking for people interested in nature. Well, this group, Nature, Forests, and Wildlife Conservation, looks like a group that would have some people who share the same values I have. Wildlife conservation and environmental issues looks like a group that might have some things that people who are interested in the things that I care about. So I would go and ask to join the group. And that's one I am not a part of. So I'm going to ask to join that group. And it's going to, almost all of them are going to ask questions. And you want to answer those questions. So I'm going to actually do that while we're on. And agree to the group rules. And we have the same kind of questions in our group. And always pay attention. See, most groups are going to say no promotions and spam. That's why I said you can't go in there and say, buy my art. That's not what you're there for. You're there to build community. The people coming to find your art will happen naturally, but you're looking for community right now. So that's one way, is to search on Facebook. And you were asking about hashtags. That is absolutely a way to find pages, accounts on Instagram that are applicable. So if I go to Instagram and I type in the search, and you can use hashtag and type in the search title, or you can just search by keyword. It's going to give you accounts that have that keyword in the title. So you're liable to get better results by having the hashtag in there. And it's going to give you all the posts that have hashtags that deal with landscape. And you can look to see if there are images that you connect with that seem to be part of what you might be interested in. So I live on the coast, near the coast, and that's something that's important to me. I might click on the ones that have to do with that and follow some of those people. That's another way to create or find community. You can also Use the hashtag like I did in conservation. And you'll see all sorts of different possibilities: wildlife conservation, marine conservation, ocean conservation, conservation education. And I'm going to go to that for a minute and see what I see. And then again, look for images that you connect with and see if you see groups that are people that align with what you're interested in. But that's a way to begin to find community, is absolutely through either search hashtags in Instagram or Pinterest. It works on Pinterest too, or through groups on Facebook. And Pretty says, will this webinar be available to view later? Yes, it will. It's being recorded, absolutely. And you can share it with friends later. So you're going to get a link to the replay after the fact. And I'm fine with your sharing that with friends. Absolutely. Like I said, this is just going to be an educational webinar because of what we're going through right now. Yeah, make it look visually organic and juicy. Any posts that you share, yes, absolutely make it look like that. So I think I've caught all the questions, but I want to remind everybody, look at community. Remember, your art's important. Still paint. Pick up that brush. Yes, there's an audience out there for you, and they need to hear from you now more than ever. So share your work in social media platforms that feel in alignment with what you do. Remember to have absolutely honest, authentic conversations with your audience. Remember, you have a responsibility to share, and you don't have to save the world all big picture at one time. Every time you have a connection with another person, you're saving the world. You're saving it one person at a time. So happy painting, everyone. Stay safe. Know that we're going to be fine, and we will paint the world back together again. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye for now.